appear to be streaming live here from Landmark. Doing a little testing here. I'm gonna go to full screen, see if it live streams properly. Nice, it seems to be working okay. Except for the fact that the textures, I hate the textures get all goofy when you change from full screen to a windowed mode or back again. The textures all disappear until they come back like they do, just like that. There you go, finally. Alright, so I wanted to show this work I've been doing on this scout career. This is based on a 100-ton vessel from the Traveler role-playing game. It's been around since the 70s. It's a fun game. Anyway, so I posted a picture of this in the Traveler group, and some people had some interest. So this is Landmark. It's a 3D game, MMO. And basically you have building tools and you build some really cool stuff. There's materials in the world, you have to go harvest them. There are mobs you can fight. You gather lumens, which are basically the currency which you then use to purchase props. All kinds of different pre-made items that you can add. For example, my flaming sword that I created over here is flaming because it has 300 torches embedded into it. I've got the graphics turned down a bit to keep the frame rates in good shape, but once we get a little closer to it here, you can see it now a little better. So yeah, there's 300 torches there. Those are props, so you can only recipes drop from mobs when you kill them. You also get them when you're harvesting stuff. So when you're just sitting around building stuff, you're having fun, of course, but you're not really earning anything. Set the chat off to the side, make my window a little more clear for the moment. Alright, so working on the layout of this ship. Those of you that are familiar with the Scout Courier layout know it's this wedge-shaped ship with 3 decks, and it's a bit tricky to lay this thing out. If you've ever tried to do this in 3D modeling software, I've done this with Blender. I'm going to share some pictures of that to the group also, so you can see that. But it's tricky because this middle deck especially, which runs pretty much the full length of the ship, culminates in the cockpit area, the bridge area up front here, and you just have this somewhat squarish floor plan inside a wedge shape, and eventually you run out of space, so the alignment of it is really critical. So this is actually in Landmark here. This is the 3rd time I've started to lay this out. The first time I started with the floor plan, and that was not a good idea. And the second time I realized I was going to have to build these the outer hull points and then go from there, and I did, but I didn't have the middle deck centered very well, and so I was running into the problem that it was sticking out of the bottom of the hull by quite a bit. So went to this third iteration, really had to think about how I wanted to lay it out. And basically what I did is I started here at the back end of the ship. And here you can see this middle layout of the floors. So there's 3 decks, and what I did was I kind of built a little bracket shaped section take these floors away for a second. You can see what I'm talking about. So I built a bracket shaped section. Okay, so I built a bracket-shaped section that looked like this. You can see it pretty clearly here what I did, right, like this. This section here. And in this, in this landmark game, you build things in using blocks. On each block or voxel, you'll also hear them referred to as is this basically the smallest unit you can use. You can smooth things down smaller to do put detailing on the edges of things, that sort of thing. But basically 1 unit is the smallest you can go. So using this scale of 5 blocks equals 1 meter, which is about what it works out to be. So we're building decks here using the Traveler layout, and that is when you're looking at deck plans, you'll see they're drawn out on graph paper, and each square will represent a cube, or rather, yeah, a rectangular cube, if you will, that is 1.5 meters on each side on the floor plan and 3 meters high. So using our 5 units equals 1 meter, you'll see here one deck of the ship is 15 units high. We have 13 units of open space with 1 unit on both the top and the bottom, representing the ceiling and the floor bulkheads, if you will. So 15 units high. We're going 8 units wide, including 1 unit on each side for the side-to-side walls. So 6 units from clear open space. This represents the main hallway of the ship, if you will, which will essentially run the length of the ship with some open spaces on each side. And one of the problems is, of course, if you have 5 units representing 1 meter, half a meter, or in this case, normally the hallway is 1 square wide, which on the Traveler floor plan, as I said, is 1.5 meters. So that would equal 7.5 units. Well, you can't really draw a half a unit. You sort of can, you sort of can't. And so we kind of had a compromise here. And so we're using 8 units, and we're including the wall space of 1 unit on each side. So 1 unit represents, as I said, 5 units equals 1 meter. So 1 unit equals 20 centimeters, 1/5 of a meter. So I started with that, and I stacked them up one on top of another to get my 3 decks. And the point of this was I wanted to make a center point at the nose of the ship to be the anchor point for the angled hull lines. And that's what I've done here. Is I've got this anchor point up front here, this cube right here. And that cube becomes the anchor point for the line tool, which is what I use to draw the outer edges of the hull that you can see. And the point of laying out this part first is so that I can make sure that the nose is centered. Because if it's not centered, I run into that problem. Like I said, I had built my deck a little too low. It wasn't centered enough. And so I ran into problems. So what ends up happening, and you can see we have here so sorry, I got a little turned around here. Alright, let's get over here. So I've got my 3 decks going up, and then I knew that I needed the hull to extend out at least a little bit past that. And I knew the main constricting point on the triangular or diamond shape of the back end of the ship was going to be the width of the second floor. And that's marked out here by this darker piece right here. So I placed that, and knowing that, so I had my 3 decks, so I went an additional meter, that's an additional 5 blocks down, and an additional 5 blocks up. And I created another anchor point. So basically I've got an anchor point up here, an anchor point here, I've got an anchor point at the nose, and then in order to create these 2 anchor points on the side, what I did is basically I just, when you're in this one particular type of build mode, you can basically fly, and I just got up into this spot. Mind you, the line pieces were not drawn yet. I only had this dark black piece here drawn in, and I just got into this spot, and I kind of eyeballed how far out I would need to be in order to clear this piece. And so I just kind of eyeballed it, and it ended up being it's 3 meters, I believe, 15 units from here to here. Oh, I'm sorry, 20. Well, that counts the anchor piece too, though. So 21 units, or about 4 meters. So that's how far out we needed to get to make this back piece. And then, so once I had my anchor points, I drew these lines in. And the other part that becomes really tricky on this particular design is how the cockpit, the bridge, if you will, has this kind of signature triangular shaped windshield section. And so what I did was, after I laid out the back piece, and I laid out the back triangular pieces before I'd actually done the nose, or no, I had laid out all the skeleton of the hull, if you will. I took the floor of the middle deck, that's kind of being my controlling measuring point, because that's the one point of the ship that requires the most width. And so I laid out my bulkhead sections of where the main bulkheads would be. And so I knew where I wanted this window piece to be in terms of being how far forward it was. And so I then cut out a piece of this top section at that distance, and then I just laid out a linking line between the side and that point from there to there, and that became the framework for the, sorry, I'm having issues, there we go. That became the framework for this front windshield, which it's not completely finished at this point, obviously. but it will have windows added to it, etc. And inside you've got the cockpit, the bridge area, which is somewhat small, but it is on this vessel. That's the way it is. And so there will be a window here. This will be solid. This deck here is solid. And there's a small compartment here where the sensors for the ship are located. And that was the trickiest part. So then I laid out this wall. This is all in the process of being built. This is all going to get cleaned up eventually. But so that's how I laid this all out. So just wanted to show also a technique for filling in a flat surface that matches up with a sloped surface, and how to make this look nice and smooth. So we're going to come up here and get out of this flying around mode. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's annoying. Sometimes it's easier to do this. So you can see here we have a nice clean edge here, and the way to do this is, so we've already laid out the angled area. So let's come over here, and what we're going to do is we're going to lay this out. Get our tools up here. So we're going to lay this out by this. We're going to lay out a big chunk of floor here. Alright, so I used I had the window down. Pull it back up so you can see it here. Okay, under the tools window, so I used the highlight selection tool. I selected this space, then I switched to the add tool, and then I used the alt tool to pick the material I wanted, and now I'm going to add it. So we're a little laggy here. That's what happens when you stream sometimes. Okay, add tool, boom. Okay, so we added that. So that's good. Now we're going to add some more. And what we're going to do is we're going to be very careful that when we add sections, we don't want to cut into this angular piece too much. We just kind of come up right there real close to it like that. Okay. Again, we're just going to keep adding. And what we're going to get eventually is we're going to get a bunch of you can even just use singular units if you want to add in that way. Like so. Just fill it all in. And what you're going to get is a series of these almost shark tooth shaped edge pieces. Right? So I'm being stupid here. Okay, so you can end up with a series of these jagged edges that cut into your angular piece, that obviously doesn't look very smooth, does it? So that's not what we're going to want. What we're going to do here eventually is what we're going to do is we're going to redraw. We're going to get all this in place. And then we're going to redraw this outer line piece, which also will allow me to show you how that line tool works. Because if you're going to try to create any sort of angular based design here in Landmark, you are definitely going to need to learn how to use the line tool and some of the do's and don'ts of the line tool. One of the don'ts is when you have something like this, your angular line is going to have to be a 2x2 voxel line, or you're just not going to get the smoothness. That's the minimum size line tool that you can work with. Alright, we're going to go back to flying camera here for a minute. Okay, we're going to hide this panel for a second. Okay, so we put our floor in on that side, and actually it needs to be thicker. Do a nifty trick here. We're going to highlight all of this. Missed it. Just like that. Drag this out. I'm gonna copy that, and then we're gonna paste it. The purpose of this is just to make this one more thickness thick. Nice, did that work? Yep, that worked out pretty nice actually. Okay, so again, the edges are all really rough, and what we're going to do here is we are going to come down here, and we've got our anchor point here, but actually what we're going to do here is we're going to this little section right here. We're going to delete that. Oh, it didn't give me where I wanted it to be. Lag, very laggy. There you go. So we're going to get rid of all of that. Now we're going to use our line tool. That's number 8. We're gonna grab this material so we're not pasting the dark stone. We want this light stone, so we're going to start it here. This is key. You need a 2x2 block. You just do for the line tool. You can't make it any smaller, and this is the only way you're going to get a good smooth line. And what's critical here is you can see we can grab here, we can grab up here. You'll note that there's a facing to this. It's the tool that you use to start your line with isn't a full voxel thick, so there's definitely a facing to the beginning of the line. And what's critical is if you want your line to be smooth, the beginning and the end facing have to be parallel to one another. So we can't start with a facing like this and then end with a facing like this and expect it to be smooth. It won't be. You'll have missing pieces even when you get a green line. So this is very important. So we're going to click here. That starts our line tool. Now we're going to create a line, and we're going to drag this thing all the way down to the nose piece. Okay. And this whole time, we're not going to click on, we're right-clicking. When you hear me clicking, I'm right-clicking for changing my camera view. And what we're going to do is we're going to get back down here, and what we're going to do is we're just going to be repasting over this line that's here. Now, this is what I'm talking about. We can't do the facing like this. That's up. That's no good. It's got to be the same facing. So what we've done here is we've created this little piece off to the side strictly for being able to anchor to tap onto. So what we're going to do here is we're going to get this thing lined up on here. Now that's not where we want our line to be, but now we're going to use the T key, T as in Tom, and hit that T, and here's what we're doing. We are now in fine-tuning mode. This used to be called tweak mode, so if you hear people talking about tweak mode, this is what they're talking about, fine-tuning. And under fine-tuning, we can now using the mouse doesn't move. We're going to be able to use the keys, and I'll show you here what we're going to do. So the first option is to be able to resize. We don't want to resize, so we're just going to ignore that. So we're going to hit our Q key. Q is in Qbert, quintessence. Anyway, we hit the Q key, and now this gives us our X, Y, and Z coordinate changes that we can make. And what we're going to do is we're going to drag this thing over to the left. Okay, it's tricky sometimes getting it in the spot. There it is. And we're not going to draw anything until we click this check mark up here, so we're not going to do that yet. We're going to grab it, we're going to pull it one more back. So now, too far, one more up this way. So now it's on the facing of our anchor cube, right where we want it to be. And you can see that it's all lined back up again. And what we're going to do is we're going to redraw that line. Now it's in the spot that we want. We're on the right material. We click check mark. Draw it. And it does. It redraws the line, and what it does is it smooths all that material out because it's all filled in. The key is that you have to have it all filled in. If you have any empty gaps, those empty gaps will you can just go back and fill them in and just do this again if you have to. You can redraw this line as many times as you need to. That's why we keep this anchor point up here, so we have a way of quickly and easily reattaching our line. If we go back to the back end of the ship, where we started the line, you can see it's filled in that little bit of a spot. It's connected right up again, and it's all nice and smooth. Now we're using stone simply because we have an infinite amount of it, because it's a simple basic material. Actually not stone, we're actually using this material we're building with actually uses dirt, and it's one of the materials that you have an infinite. No, I am using stone. I take that back. It's a common item made from dirt. There is a limit to it versus this material here. Alright, this material, oh yeah, the other material, the dark material I'm using is dark worked slate, which is an infinite architectural material. Well, you have some basic ones. Anyway, the reason why I use these materials is they are relatively smooth compared to some other materials that are out there. And what we're going to do is we're later going to paint these materials over with metal or metallic materials, and then obviously having a scout ship made out of stone doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But like I said, I'm just building it that way so that later I can go over it with metal. So anyway, I just wanted to show you some of the building techniques and what I'm doing with the scout ship. There's a lot of work to be done. It's kind of painstaking work. You have to fill in all of these areas, much like I just showed you, and then smooth them out afterwards. And it's going to take a while to fill all this in and get it done, but once I get it done, I think it's going to look really sweet. I've already, on the last iteration I did of this ship before I restarted it, as I did build a bit of a hull section, and I turned it, painted it with metal, and smoothed it out real nice, and it ended up looking really, really sweet. Very smooth. Certainly not perfect, but had a great metallic look to it. It's really going to look pretty sweet when I get this thing finished. So anyway, thanks for watching. Lunch is ready. You may have heard my oven alarm just go off, so it's time to eat. And thank you very much for watching, and check out my player studio under the name Grishnak, Grishnak. I've got a few items there for sale. Modular staircase section. Also, I have this lovely castle tower for sale, and also I had one other thing up there. I forget what it is. Window, perhaps. Anyway. Check it out. Oh no, I've got a roof section. The wooden roof section. That's right. This wooden roof section. So check it out. Flaming Sword. Grishnak. I'm on the Serenity server. Serenity server. Twisted Shoreline. Just west of the spire.